Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the Assistant Director of NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, North Carolina. I'll be your host tonight, and I'm so glad you're here. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and building community around the topic of mental health. So tonight we'll be discussing faith. Faith can be an incredible source of inspiration as a person recovers from a mental health condition. Spiritual communities offer a firm foundation, and church friends can be great at pulling together so that nobody falls through the cracks. On the other hand, there's always another hand. Some groups have the misguided idea that mental health concerns should be treated with prayer and only prayer. Maybe a mental health condition is a sign of a poor relationship with God. And there are church folks who just aren't educated in the way, as many people aren't, to handle someone with a mental health concern, someone in distress. Churches tend to attract people who perhaps need more help than they're prepared to give. And I always have to say this, whatever you believe or don't believe, it's perfectly cool with NAMI. You may have a God of your understanding, Jesus, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, and that's all good with us. You may follow the path of atheist, also all good. Whatever works for you and heals you and makes your journey better, NAMI supports that. Tonight, we'll be discussing one woman's experience of Christian faith and mental health. Regardless of your beliefs, I know you'll love our guest, Amy Brundle. She's my colleague here at NAMI North Carolina. She's our marketing and communications manager. She's also a wonderful speaker, writer, and all-around human being, cat mother. So we'll be talking with Amy in just a couple moments. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Then we'll have a video of the week. And finally, we'll take your questions, members of our virtual studio audience on Facebook Live and on Zoom. Quick word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We really appreciate their guidance and their support. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
All right. So without further ado, we'll jump into our questions. We always like to know the background of our guests. Tell us about yourself in a nutshell.
Especially since we're talking about faith, I was raised in a home where we were Southern Baptist, especially. My dad was a Marine, and so we lived all over the southeastern United States. We were regular church attenders, and I was very dedicated to that. I participated in everything you could possibly, from church basketball to youth group to Bible drills to basically anything I could get my hands on, I was involved in. I graduated from high school in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and ended up going to college at Meredith and studied business and music there. Music's been a huge part of my was a huge part of my childhood and has been ever since. I started singing and learning music at 7, and so I've been studying it for some time.
Wow, yeah, you've got some training, some serious musical chops, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've accomplished a lot. What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of finishing my degree. I have a Master's of Divinity degree, and I finished that, as you'll hear, under a lot of adversity. I was also ordained in the Baptist denomination in 2018, which was kind of a culmination of about 10 years worth of work and service. And I'm proud to have gotten to the place now, through everything that I went through, where I feel like I have a beautiful family, a wonderful job, wonderful ministry opportunities, and just a very content life. I'm very proud of that.
It does take work to have a life where you're content and things are in balance. Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes intentionality, I believe. So we've talked about our backgrounds and the language we were both raised with surrounding emotions, how we're feeling, mental health, how we express ourselves. I was raised in a conservative Irish Catholic home, so not a lot of expressiveness. We were supposed to be stoic. Tell us about your upbringing, the messages you were raised with regarding emotions and mental health in particular.
Yeah, I think that being Southern and being military kind of led to this adoption of what we call the suck it up buttercup kind of mentality with a lot of emotions. And so there was honor in being tough. There was kind of a focus in not being overly sensitive, overly emotional. And so as a kid who was overly sensitive and overly emotional, so to speak, I was considered developmentally immature, like extremely bright, but developmentally immature because of not really learning the coping skills that I needed to process emotions as I matured. And this was also the 80s, so there was no real conversation about mental health. We still kind of were under a lot of really dangerous misconceptions about what mental health looked like and how much people could function with mental illness. And so that language has changed a lot. But when I was growing up, there was no concept of childhood depression or childhood anxiety or PTSD was a soldier's illness. There was no real understanding of children also having some of these complex mood disorders. And so, you didn't really learn the coping skills that I think today's kids are kind of equipped with a lot younger. Also growing up in a conservative Christian household, there was also this understanding of, a lot of your emotional health was tied in with your faith, which I still believe is true. But I think that the way that I was taught it was in more of a legalistic standpoint, where if you do the right things, if you follow this very prescribed path behavior, then God will bless you and your life will be, comfortable and exactly how you want it to be. And so it kind of drove me, that and some natural anxiety kind of drove me to be a perfectionist and perform and make sure that, all of my ducks were in a row all the time, no matter what that cost me emotionally.
It's a good way of putting it. All my ducks had to be in line, no matter the emotional cost. And as you were speaking, I realized I never heard it said explicitly, but I too grew up with that belief that if I was a good person, things would be good. My life would be, things would just unfold. It wouldn't be full of strife and anxiety and difficulty. And then when things didn't go well, the thought was, I must not be a good person because the facts of my life prove that. So your comments really resonate, and I'm seeing in the chat other people saying I had a very similar upbringing. So tell us about the accident that changed your life.
So this was in 2006. I was a day away from turning 25. And I was about to start seminary. Actually, I was a week away from starting seminary. And I had gone to visit my sister who lived in the mountains at the time. And we were basically just going to hang out for the weekend. We were going to go rafting. We were going to, go out to breweries, like just hang out, have like a mini vacation before my grad school grind was going to start. And so I had been in the Asheville area for the weekend and was driving back. And I remember this, it was Tuesday, August 8th, 2006. And I remember that I pulled off of 40 to put some gas back in my car. and had basically U-turned around to get back onto the on-ramp to 40 to continue my drive home. I was about halfway through. And the traffic was really heavy for some reason heading in that direction. It was just a little off-ramp to a small town, so I'm not exactly sure why traffic was so heavy, but I do remember that it was, and I was kind of stopped, just drifting behind this 15-passenger van. And the car behind me didn't stop, did not see the traffic in front of her had stopped. I found out later she had a small dog that was loose in the car, and the dog had jumped into her lap just long enough to distract her.
Ooh.
So when she finally realized that she was barreling at 45 miles an hour towards a stopped vehicle, she tried to correct herself by turning into the left-hand lane, but missed. And so the majority of the impact was to my left side. And she hit my car so hard that I hit the van in front of me and ended up spinning around to face the opposite direction. So there were 3 of us involved in the accident, and I never lost consciousness. So to this day, I can pull up memories of exactly how that sounded and smelled and felt mentally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So police and ambulances were very quick to show up and take all 3 of us to the hospital, and they had to use a crowbar and another tool to get my driver's side door open because it had been jammed shut by the impact. I
Wow.
was taken to the hospital, and they found that I had broken 2 non-weight bearing bones in my left hip, 3 ribs on my right side. I had bruised and jammed my mandible from clenching, and I've done permanent damage to my spine. So I will be in back pain for the rest of my life.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. It definitely, the injuries weren't so severe that, I didn't physically at least fully recover. But the worst part of the entire ordeal was that I looked up in the rearview mirror just in time to watch her come at me.
That's a lot. I have to say, I've been in small accidents, and even those, I don't think I remember every part of it. My brain is really good at shutting that stuff away. It sounds like your brain is good at documenting. Do you have a good memory?
Apparently, not when it's convenient, but I can remember things like the fact that the CD that I had half sticking out of my car got jammed into the radio and was blasting a song at full volume. I remember that my brick Nokia phone was thrown into the front passenger seat. I remember trying to get a neighbor who had run across the street when seeing the wreck to call my family and let them know where I was going to be. I remember small details like that, and every once in a while something triggers it and they just kind of pop up, and I'm taken back to that time.
Right. Gosh, and you were so young, 25, almost 25.
A day shy. In fact, the ambulance driver asked me for my ID as they were readying a stretcher, because I instinctively knew I shouldn't try to get up and out of my seat, so I didn't bother, which ended up being a very good thing. And he looked at my driver's license and he's like, "Oh, honey, that sucks for you." I'm like, yeah, yes, it does.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and you had all these intense experiences and woke up in the hospital with a different life, a different situation, a lot of pain. What did that, tell us about the symptoms and signs that you experienced after that? You had some post-traumatic stress going on.
I did, and I didn't really expect it to, because, when my sister came to visit me in the hospital, I was only in the hospital for 12 hours basically, because I was stubborn, and I told them, "Give me a pair of crutches and a Vicodin and I'm gone." I'm not spending my 25th birthday in the hospital, which in hindsight was very stupid, but you're stupid when you're that age. So
Goes with the territory.
it really does. So, but she had me laughing, she was cracking jokes in the hallway, and I was determined to make the best of it. I was determined not to lose it. And that lasted about 3 days. And then I kind of broke down, but I just kept feeling like, well, this is all part of it, right? Like I'm having to recover. It's normal to kind of be upset about this. But then notice that my anxiety levels were always here, and anything set it off. I was constantly on edge. And some of that was pain, and just some of that was this constant feeling like if I wasn't careful, something like that would happen to me again. It was the fear of the unknown all the time. And so even when I got back behind the wheel, I had multiple panic attacks and would have to pull over and call somebody who would come and drive my car back home because I literally couldn't anymore. Every single car that was behind me was out to get me, every single one. And if they got too close, I completely lost my mind. I had no rational thinking. At one point, I remember thinking, maybe I'll just deliberately drive into a tree, and that way I know that the next accident is over with. Because it was this constant fear that was going to happen, that was inevitably going to happen again. So I actually considered driving the car into a tree to just get that out of the way. I had regular nightmares, and just the panic attacks behind the wheel were the worst, because you can't operate a vehicle if you're not in your rational mind, and I was not in my rational mind. So it was very difficult to get to where I was comfortable with that again.
Sure.
And I remember at the time, Volkswagen came out with this ad campaign that basically showed people getting into their cars and, just driving away, having some casual conversation, and then out of nowhere, they would get hit. And it was an ad campaign advertising their safety features. But I was in a sports bar with friends a month after the accident, and that commercial came on television, and I about had a complete nervous breakdown in the middle of the restaurant. It was probably 6 years before I could drive past a wreck on the highway and not immediately have my blood pressure shoot through the roof. Because the memories were so intensely, like, I remembered everything. I caught hint of anything that triggered it. It was an automatic gut visceral reaction.
It's interesting, and that's what post-traumatic stress does is, our nervous system reacts as though the trauma is going to repeat itself. So, someone sees cars driving by, and post-traumatic stress sees the collision, the crash, the injuries, all the pain all over again. Yeah, well, I thank you for being vulnerable and sharing those difficult details with us. I know can't be fun to relive that, but it is such a common experience, and it would be hard to have post-traumatic stress where the trigger was such an everyday occurrence. Driving is just so much a part of everyday life in the United States.
It is. And although a lot of my symptoms have faded because it's been, 16 years, they're not completely gone. I mean, I will still have the occasional nightmare where a regular scenario suddenly turns horrifying, where, the car that I'm in is crashed into, and, so I still have these moments where my brain just decides, oh, remember that thing that, we dealt with a long time ago? Here it is again, do it again, deal with it again. And so thankfully, those times are very few and far between now, but it took absolutely years. It probably 12 years before I really felt like I had come on the other side. And now this was just this little thing that occasionally buzzed in the back of my head, but it took a really long time.
Right. Well, clearly a lot of work has gone into that, so I give you a lot of credit for that. What were your dark days like? Do you have anything to add about that?
I mean, there were definitely the darkest days really had to do with having to re-examine my faith, because I didn't understand how something like that could have happened to me when I had done all the right things. I had been the good person. I was a week away from starting a ministry degree and starting that career in that part of my life. And so at the time that I got hit, I immediately ascribed it to punishment. I
Mm,
immediately assumed that this was a punishment from God because somewhere I had strayed, I had missed the mark, I had stepped off the path, and I was now reaping some horrible reward that was going to affect the rest of my life. And I had to, I ended up dropping out of school for a semester about a year later, because I realized that although I was taking in theology academically, my heart had developed walls around it because I saw God as capricious and out to punish those who aren't perfect. And I had to really wrestle with exactly how do I frame this period of my life in a way that lets me get back to my faith. And I finally had to, like, after a lot of wrestling, I finally had to kind of come to the understanding that
I'm sure that Amy will be back with us very soon. On my screen, she's frozen. And I'm not sure, I hope that's not my internet connection, although it could be. Okay. I know that she'll be back with us very soon. It's always a difficult thing to look at the question of when bad things happen to good people. And as Amy told me her story, I really thought a lot about that, whether it's the concept of God in a world where terrible things can happen to innocent children, or the concept of, here I've done my best, I'm on my way to seminary. Why is it that bad things happen to good people? It's easy to personalize when something small goes wrong. The human brain, especially those who live with depression and anxiety, it goes to, what have I done wrong? How did I make this happen? Why do I deserve this? Because this wouldn't happen to a good person. And so it was so interesting to hear Amy's perspective, and with the trauma that she has gone through, it's just very, very challenging to pull that together and have that faith. How do we believe in God as someone who loves us and wants to pull us into that spirit of love and that spirit of compassion that most of us want to believe in? And now Amy's back, so I can stop talking.
um, so I guess during that semester off, I did some really hard thinking and really hard praying and really hard talking to literally anybody who would listen about sometimes things that happen to us are the consequences of our own actions, but sometimes they're the consequences of living in a world with other people. My accident didn't happen to me because I had strayed and God decided to punish me for it. My accident happened because a woman who should not have been driving in the first place let her dog distract her on a busy road. And, my response to that was what was going to define my life and my faith and, how I was able to relate to God after that. And so it was not easy, because when you've built your entire life trying to be pleasing to God and then feel like he just hit you with a car for like no reason, there are moments where you're like, well, then why am I doing anything? but I think it took a long time to kind of come out of a misunderstanding of what testing and trial and punishment and just God's relation to his people really was.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting because we can understand rationally, well, of course, that's not my fault. But there's always the level of the heart and the inner child and that little part of us that says, but it feels like it is.
Yeah, and I was the kind of kid who took responsibility for everything, whether it was my fault or not. And and so I was kind of doing the same in this instance too, taking responsibility for something that wasn't my fault, but how I responded to it was going to be my decision, and I had to make that decision.
Mhm. Right. Um, and it takes a while to get to that decision and realize you're making a decision sometimes. So support networks are such an important part of recovery. How did your relationships change over time?
Well, when I started being treated for PTSD, I also realized that a lot of the things that I dealt with kind of in childhood and in adolescence were maybe undiagnosed mental illnesses, and kind of started that journey of realizing that and getting treated for that. And as part of that recovery, I really was trying to be more gentle and understanding with myself. And that led to being more open with people. And some people honestly had no idea how to handle that level of vulnerability at all. So I definitely lost some friends because they just suddenly I was too high maintenance, and they couldn't deal with the severity of that kind of problem.
Mm.
My family started out hesitant because we were, dipping into those forbidden topics. Um, but as oddly enough, my sister is actually a therapist, and one with a considerable amount of experience by this point. And at first, when she was kind of first beginning her career, I think she saw PTSD as sort of, again, a wartime disease. And that, what I was going through wasn't as severe as I was making it out to be. But she actually apologized for that viewpoint several years later after treating clients who had had similar experiences and recognizing that I wasn't alone in my experience. My family has gotten a lot more openly supportive as they kind of learn to embrace the language, and I think are also understanding where some of their trauma responses come from, and have, dug at their own childhoods a little bit, so that we're all understanding better kind of where some of these issues come from, and the fact that that we may have been a negative influence on each other, but we can also be a positive influence on each other. And I will say one benefit to getting older is you kind of find your ride or dies. And so I feel like I have that now because I have been able to learn how to winnow people out of my life who were not willing to be supportive or vulnerable or kind of an assist in my recovery instead of a hindrance.
Well, I'm so glad that you have a support network, that you're able to strengthen it. And sometimes strengthening is paring down and figuring out where to put our energy for a good result. And this seems like a good time to mention NAMI support groups, whether you're a family member, caretaker, or someone who lives with a mental health challenge. NAMI support groups are an excellent way to find people who will understand your experience and who speak a language of recovery and hope. We go for sincere, non-critical acceptance. We really share a lot at NAMI support groups, and it's a great way to learn from other people who've been there. So give that a shot. We have a lot of great listings on our website, a beautiful calendar, which Amy has created, and it shows all the listings, all of our classes, support groups. You can sort them by what you're looking for. It'll be a beautiful experience, I promise. Okay. So how did your faith beliefs evolve over time?
I think I came to a more nuanced understanding of how God relates to his people. It kind of left the more legalistic black and white viewpoint that I'd had in childhood and really became more of not really seeing God as this taskmaster who has a scale in his hand, where he's measuring out your good versus your bad to see what's going to happen to you in life. Very, very flawed view. Now my view is more of someone who sees what happens to his people and loves them no matter what, that walks alongside of us, that is available to teach us life lessons through what we're going through, but doesn't necessarily cause the circumstances that lead to the lesson. And that is the amount of grace and forgiveness and compassion and just knowing us through and through with God is so powerful from my understanding. It's so much more than we ascribe to him. We try to act like he's going to act like a person with all of our flaws and foibles and misunderstandings. And that's not who God is. And so I won't say that my faith has ever really been fully restored. I think that part of depression is constantly having to redefine who you are, how you relate to the world, and if you are a person of faith, how you relate to God. And you constantly have to do that because depression lies to you and tries to diminish your worth. But I believe that we all have inherent worth because we were created. And so if I cling to that, then that is louder than depression's voice. And so I won't say that my faith is perfect, but I'll say that it was strengthened by that experience, because I think sometimes you don't know how to recognize a mountain unless you've gone through the valley for a while.
Well, that's a really good way of putting it, that part of depression is having your faith challenged all the time by that, whether it's an inner critic or just a self-belief that is negative. Yeah, living with depression is sort of like you're always having to make an argument, always having to defend yourself against yourself. For me,
it is. It's justifying your existence and expecting that you're going to have to do that to everyone you meet. And, the people who care about you are wondering why on earth you're wasting your mental energy on something that's already been done. Your existence is already, just be who you are. You don't have to prove that you belong. Just be. God would not have put me here and given me things to do if I was not worth the time and energy. You know what I mean? It's just it's an understanding of we're allowed to be patient with ourselves because the one who created us is already more patient with us than we could possibly understand. So why are we wasting mental energy beating ourselves up for just being ourselves when that's not what we are created to do? And we have a limited amount of time on this planet and we're wasting it in self-doubt.
Yeah, I once attended a girls' soccer tournament. Softball tournament. I was never an athlete, but I was there as a supporter, and there were two brackets. You played your first game, and then after that, for the rest of the tournament, you were in the winner's bracket or the loser's bracket. And it always struck me that depression just felt like the loser's bracket, like there was something, something that had gone before that could not be undone. And that was it. You were slotted for life.
Yeah, I saw a television show once where it was a fantasy show, and they basically had the main character followed around by a doppelganger, and the doppelganger basically it was a curse, and it basically just followed the main character around and told him every awful thing he had ever believed about himself.
Ooh,
And I remember pausing the show, pointing to my husband and going, that's the best description of depression I've ever seen.
right,
It
right.
is having a little you in the back of your head constantly telling you all the worst things you could possibly believe about yourself. And you can't escape because it's your head.
Yeah, it's our own personal Greek chorus. All right, I'm seeing some comments in the chat that really resonates. So, gotta love depression talk. So let's focus on music. What role did music play in your recovery?
Well, for the beginning part, music was kind of that all-encompassing thing that I could throw myself into. I mean, if anybody on this call has ever been a music major, you know that it is grueling and constant. The workload is significant. And even as I was balancing music and theology, still my little part of it was really demanding. And so it kind of gave me a channel for it kind of gave me a place to escape. Music doesn't really we're using the same notation that we've used for 1,000 years. It's a constant. It's something that you can go back to that's not going to change. That was kind of my thing that I could dive into when I needed something to do to keep myself occupied mentally. But it's also just been, I mean, it is the emotional catharsis. It is the way of expressing yourself when words aren't good enough. It gave me joy and community. So when I was in school, I was in the orchestra and choir. I was volunteering with my church. And then afterwards, I started a ministry career. And even when I was depressed or anxious or anything, the idea that I still needed to get up and serve the next Sunday sometimes just kept me going. It was partly that obligation, but it was also partly the joy that I got from creating music with other people. There's something incredibly powerful about putting a group of people together and having them perform together. You get a whole lot of disparate people and you put them together to complete one project, and especially something as emotionally powerful as music. I'm a choir director, and one of the biggest rushes that I can get is at the end of a performance when I know that after several weeks of hard work, these various people have gotten together and put this piece of art together and created this one resonant sound that is, emotionally capturing, and it's huge. There's no feeling like that.
That would be wonderful. I get that. So, how do you take care of yourself today?
Well, some of it is music. I do direct kind of special occasion holiday choirs for my church. And again, that just simple act of creating music is a really powerful source of joy. But I think that I have also gotten a lot better at turning off that part of my brain that needs to be the perfectionist and the overachiever. And so I build in a lot more time for just things like watching TV with my husband and reading novels and getting outside and walking and spending time with my family. We travel as much as we can, which is a great way of just kind of resetting in a new place for a while. But I'm not perfect at it. I still have kind of days where I feel like I'm wearing myself out for no reason. But I think that with age has come a little bit more patience, recognizing that, you know what, today is a bad day. Today is not a good mood day. So I'm going to do what is necessary to get through to the next day. And then I'm going to shut down and let that be okay. Instead of basically needing productivity to, fulfill something in me. It's just, you know what, we're just going to call it. Today is done. and letting that be okay, and a recognition that it's not a personality flaw. It's not, it's not a failing of character. It's a disease that flared up today, and I need to tend to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a speaker at Stanford, Robert Sapolsky, and he talks about depression. He teaches biochemistry, and he talks about different mental illnesses in that light. And with folks who live with depression, when we sleep, we're not getting the normal restful cycles of sleep. I guess they've done studies, and the brain waves are indicate that the person is fighting a lion or something like that. It's not restful sleep. It's something else that happens. It's just a very different situation. A really interesting guy, Robert Sapolsky, if you ever want to check him out. But it is tough living with depression. It's takes a lot of energy.
Yes. But I will say that self-aware has been the best thing that I've ever gotten out of therapy. Self-awareness of just being able to know when you're going to need extra accommodations, or when you're not maybe in the right frame of mind to be around people.
Right.
And I have very patient friends, but nobody wants somebody who's irritable around them all the time. And just kind of knowing that this is not a good day for me to have conversation with somebody who did not cause this.
Right.
Yeah. And I think patience, and if this is authentic to you, then prayer, and not lofty prayers, but talking to a friend about, I feel like garbage today. Could you just give me enough to do what I need to do and let me be okay with it? Just having that conversation.
I'm writing that one down.
Yeah.
That's a good one. What gives you hope, Amy?
I think that, well, a couple of things. One is that I know that I have a family behind me, that no matter what goes on with me, they're not going anywhere. And so I don't really have to, I have a safe space, I guess, in that. And then I guess what also gives me hope is, kind of the faith-based understanding that, despite all that I've been through, and despite sometimes the poor reactions or negative things I've done or whatever, that God walked with me through the entire thing. And so he's not going to quit now. He's not going to stop halfway. I'm still going to have that security moving forward. And so, days with a mental illness are, or can be dark, but sometimes it's the anticipation of that darkness that's almost worse. And so just knowing that, for me at least, that God's always going to be there in some capacity with me, means that, despite depression telling you you're alone because you're not worth being around, like I've already had evidence that that's not true, and it won't ever be true, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I like how you pull in a mixture of, we might call it cognitive therapy, or just the thought underlying the difficult feeling and the situations and the feelings themselves. So sort of that bundle that we have to work on and to improve the way we feel.
It's a constant, my therapist calls it repent and replace. And not repent as in you're doing something wrong, but like turn away from the negative thought and replace it with something positive. Turn away from the thing that you think is false, that deep down in your rational brain is false, and replace it with the truth. And just keep doing that until the negative things, the false things, sound hollow, and then they're much easier to ignore. But that is a constant day by day process that's kind of exhausting.
Yes.
But I think that knowing that even when I fail at that, I'm not, we're not completely done. That's not over. It's not, I just start again the next day, and try again.
That was very well said. Yeah, because for me, I can think to early in recovery, the same traps of my depressive thinking were traps in recovery. So, oh no, I did it wrong. I'm a failure at this too. I won't get this right. So it's practice, and practice makes permanent. A friend of mine used to say, just keep walking towards the goal. And if we can give ourselves grace, that helps a lot too.
Yeah, it does, because your journey is never going to be like this.
Right.
It's going to be like this. But as long as the basic trajectory is mostly upward, then we're doing great.
All right, I like it. Okay, we've reached the end of the interview portion of our show. Thanks for being here with us, everyone. Before we wrap up and move to our video of the week, I want to give a big shout out to our volunteers working behind the scenes. Executive Director Gary Kreitz, who's always there and does so much to help his team, and our intern from App State, MSW student Caitlin Rita. So, of course, a big shout out, of course, to Amy for spending your evening with us and sharing your story with us. It takes courage to do that. A wonderful comment from Gary in the chat box. Faith is believing that you are completely acceptable as you are, no matter how you feel. All right, now let's show our video of the week. One of our former mascots at NAMI, North Carolina, Roxy Morrison. I could not tell if the video actually came through. Video is not going. Okay. Well, I would hate to deprive y'all of an adorable little beagle video. So let's try that one more time. It's 30 seconds of your life, so it'll be worth it. Here we go. Here we go again. Aww. Okay. Let me hit the stop share. We've got 3 questions in the queue. We'll be taking questions from our virtual studio audience on Facebook Live and Zoom. Thanks, everyone. Let's see what we've got here. From Gary, to the extent that you feel comfortable, could you talk a little bit about the challenges that clergy dealing with mental health conditions face?
Yes, so there are several. One is that a lot of people in churches kind of grew up like I did without a whole lot of language or understanding of mental health conditions. So it was just kind of understood that if you were going through something, then you needed to pray about it, you needed to have faith, and God would just kind of magically take some of those things away. Now, I don't discount the power of miraculous healing. However, most of us don't experience that. And I think that kind of simplifying it to that degree really ignores a whole lot of nuance of how these conditions come to be, how people respond to trauma, and how, that kind of thinking basically gives people the idea that there's no recourse for recovering from difficult life events. They end up just kind of shutting it inside. And because of that idea, because of that stigma, clergy are even more likely to do that, because not only do we need to be seen as spiritually sound as the rest of our congregation, but we need to be seen as leaders who actually have more together and more understanding and more solid faith that's never shaken. There's a kind of, I hesitate to use the word epidemic, but there's kind of an epidemic right now of clergy leaving their positions because they have let mental health issues fester to the point where they are no longer effective and they leave the ministry. This is unfortunately made worse by being a woman in clergy, because a lot of women's mental health issues in general are much more easily written off as just personality, or we exaggerate, or just not taken seriously in general. And in a lot of denominations, women clergy have to fight to be at the table, whether they're healthy or not. So being a woman in clergy and being a mentally ill woman in clergy, two strikes. And I also think that it's difficult when you're a leader in any capacity to admit to that level of vulnerability and know who in your organization you can trust. Because if the people either don't understand or don't believe that it's, kind of a real condition, or just think that that somehow limits your competence in ministry, they can make life difficult for you, whether they mean to or not. So there's a lot of uphill battles. Thankfully, we are talking about this more, but I think there's a long way to go.
I agree completely. Comment in the chat from April: our women's behavior may be blamed on hormones. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of ways to trivialize women, any human, if you're trying to. Comment from Gary: Amy has written amazing essays on this topic. All right. We've got a brief lull in the questions, so I'm going to make some announcements. When you finish your Zoom, please fill out the survey that should magically appear on your screen. It helps us to improve the show over time, and it will help us show our funders the value of what we do. We need your insight and your feedback. Please help us out in that way. Join us next week. We've got Marine veteran and North Carolina resident Eric Sowers. He's written a book of poetry about his recovery from post-traumatic stress. Some folks with PTSD are in fact soldiers. The majority are not, but certainly a significant minority are military veterans with post-traumatic stress. And he's a wonderful person, a Marine Corps veteran, who'll be sharing his journey with us. All right, keep the questions coming. One question that came to my mind, Amy, was there a particular treatment or process or turning point in your recovery that was very helpful?
I think in general, a lot of the therapy that I've had has kind of focused on CBT and kind of building that self-awareness, so that I had another therapist describe it as stopping the tape. So,
and if we could, that's cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, so I had one therapist describe it as stopping the tape. I'm an elder millennial, so I fully understand that what a cassette is. So it was stopping the cassette tape when it starts playing things that aren't true and replacing it. And over time, kind of having those images in mind of stopping a tape, stopping a recording, made me more self-aware subconsciously of the thoughts that went through my head. And so it's been years, but now I feel like I am much more comfortable recognizing that a spiral is coming and being able to just be like, no, we're not doing that today, and turn it off before it gets started. That it doesn't happen all the time, but it's a lot easier to stop it when you realize that you don't actually have to be subject to intrusive thoughts or negative emotions. You can make that conscious decision not to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I was lucky enough to participate in a dialectical behavioral therapy group in Columbus, Ohio. Gary's comment, that is so hard to catch our thoughts. And that's what I'm getting to. We became aware of our thoughts by focusing on them and writing out counter arguments. And when I was in therapy, part of dialectical behavioral therapy is a group process once a week, and then part of it is therapy once a week. And the therapist would not let you say anything negative about yourself. She would call me out and I would have to correct it. If I said, I feel stupid, she would say, stupid is not an emotion. How do you feel?
Mhm.
And having someone challenge me again and again, even for 1 hour in a week, helped me to realize how many judgments and how many self criticisms, fair and mostly unfair, were going through my mind at any given moment.
Yeah, there's a New Testament verse that actually encourages you to take every thought captive. And the context is in making sure that your thoughts are, on positive things and not kind of devolving into more sinful behaviors. But it can also very easily be applied to, just making sure that you're clinging to things that are true and that you're not allowing untrue thoughts about yourself to get any sort of foothold.
I love that. I also want to say, as you listen to this and experiment with these ideas in your own thought process, your own recovery, anyone out there, please be very, very gentle with yourself. Because I think my first year or two after I encountered this whole concept was beating myself up because I couldn't do it. It takes a lot to get through the layers, to have that awareness when the thought is springing up instead of 10 seconds later. For me, it did. Please be very, very gentle with yourself. This isn't a competition. It's not something you'll master in a minute or an hour or a day. It's a lifetime journey. And a therapist, a good friend will help you do that without being too harsh with yourself.
Absolutely. It's a practice.
Right. Well said.
Mhm.
Anonymous question from Facebook. When will this be available to watch again? I want to watch again and share with others. Well, you're lovely. I love that question. Thank you for that question. Would you like to answer, Amy, or would you like me to?
Typically in all Thursdays with NAMI, I try to have the full video posted onto our YouTube channel on the next day. So it should be up by tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, now Amy is going on vacation next week and she has this enormous scrolling list of things to do. So we're gonna not get too bent out of shape if that doesn't happen. It's also on Facebook. We're recording live on Facebook. So this will live on Facebook, on our Facebook page, NAMI North Carolina. Thank you for that question. Another fun question. What is your perfect day?
Oh, well, it starts late because I am not a morning person by any stretch. And then there is a little bit of just me and coffee and reflection time before I get to spend the day either watching TV or just out on the town with my husband. A dinner where I don't have to cook. Maybe a glass of wine, and then a movie or a very chill evening on our couch with the cat between us, and just kind of enjoying watching something or sports together. We're pretty laid back people, and so anytime where I just get uninterrupted time with him and
Hmm.
time to relax is perfect for me.
That sounds lovely. And I should say the actual question was, what to you is a perfect day off? But I kind of assumed it would be a day off if it was a perfect day.
I love my work, however, that is accurate. Also, if I can't be home, I'd rather be at the beach. So
I like it. Yeah. I'm writing this one down too. Good ideas. Question, how long does it take you to recover from a bad day? That's from April.
it depends. Sometimes a bad day is a bad week. I feel like I'm pretty high functioning, so I still, get up, make it into the office, etc. But yeah, I think if I give myself time in the afternoon or evening to just kind of do what I need to do, then the bad day doesn't last much longer than a bad day. But I mean, depression does have periods where it's a week. And yeah, I think it really just kind of depends. Sometimes I can do the right kind of things to, distract the bad mood for a while, and then it shifts rather quickly. And then sometimes it's just determined it's going to hang out for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we all have those periods.
Right. I like the nuance to your answer. You made a comment about it depends on how much I can navigate the bad day early on. Can I build in some, you didn't say, can I build in some time for rest? But that's where my mind went.
Mhm.
If for me, if I have to press on and press on and press on, it will be a tough week and I'll need to sleep a lot that weekend.
Yeah, and it's kind of knowing your limitations as far as like activities or chores or whatever. And sometimes for me, it's as simple as I wake up kind of on the wrong side of the bed or whatever, knowing it's going to be a bad day, and try to go ahead and build in things like, well, I'm going to call somebody on the way to work, or I'm going to listen to this podcast or this music, or I'm going to dress in these colors, and I'm going to introduce little tiny things to try to, pull myself out of this, because if I ruminate on it, then it's going to become more entrenched and last longer. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But in more cases than not, it has turned a bad morning into a passable day, and then the next day is fine. And sometimes passable is good enough.
Mm-hmm. Those were such healthy choices. I'm impressed with that. Like as soon as I knew where you were going, I'm thinking, yes, there's chocolate, there's coffee, there's ice cream.
Maybe not for breakfast, maybe later in the day if I'm still struggling,
Thank you. All right. Gary has a question. As a church musician, how do you work with hymns like, and now I am happy all the day?
Ooh, that's tough because that was one that was sung a lot in my childhood. And
Is that why is that bad?
So because, and now I'm happy all the day. If you're singing those kind of lyrics, then it can lead to kind of an idea of, if you are a believer, you should be happy all the time. If you're not, then there must be something wrong, because you must not have a full understanding of what being a believer is all about. Gotcha. Which leads to a whole lot of suppressing mental illness, because, well, obviously, if I'm sad, that means I'm not close enough to Jesus, because, then I wouldn't be sad anymore. I think that there's a couple of ways. One is you can limit how much you use some of those songs in favor of songs with more nuanced lyrics. But I also think that if you do want to lead with that song, the entire chorus is, "At the cross where I first saw the light, and the burden of my heart rolled away. It was there by faith I received my sight. So if you're taking it in the context of the words, then you're kind of understanding that, in the grand scheme of things, I am more joyful now because I have faith and I, understand this truth about how God relates to me. And so you can use that as an opportunity to have like a learning moment with your congregation and be like, we sing about being happy all the time. Obviously, we're not happy all the time. However, we can have joy in understanding that this is where our faith comes from, and we believe in a God who sacrifices for us. And I think that being able to engage your congregation and have those teaching moments is actually a really important part of the job.
That was a beautiful answer. You addressed the logic, what is the problem logically with the lyric? How can we counter that? And then you kind of zoomed out and said, but if we look at this in context, that moment where we see the light, we all have moments of insight, and you can see that that does make life better. Wow, that was very lovely. Thank you. Okay. So we go as long as the questions come in, and usually it's 8. Sometimes it's a little later. Are there any things that you would like to add? Any questions that we haven't asked?
I guess I would just say that if you are a person of faith, know that God is big enough for all of your emotions. He's not just here for the happy. He's not just here for the content. He's here for the angry. He's here for the sad, the grieving, the confused, the frustrated. He's big enough for all of that. And if you bring your entire person, if you bring your entire self into your faith, then you have a more nuanced and I think a better relationship with God. And I know that I and multiple others are working to make our congregations places where people who struggle with a number of different things can find safety and healing in the congregation, because that's what it's for. If you can't go anywhere else, you should be able to go to church and receive that acceptance and that healing and that support from other people. And so, if you are at all in any sort of leadership position or have any influence within your church body, make that a priority to make your place of worship an accepting and open body for people with mental illnesses, so that they don't have to question whether or not they are acceptable to the house of God as they are. We shouldn't have to bring a false self into God's house. That should be where we're most accepted and we're most open.
Absolutely. Well, I can see what an effective preacher you would be, and I'm sure you are. And I love the comment, God is big enough for all of your emotions. And so are we at NAMI. If you're out there feeling alone, feeling disconnected, I've had years of my life where I just felt like nobody spoke my language. I didn't feel seen or heard. If you're out there feeling that way, please give us a call. We would love to see you at our support groups. Our helpline manager, Virginia, can help you find resources in your area that will be good for you and make a difference. We would love to hear from you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Amy. It's been lovely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Take care. All right. Bye. Great job.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.